We're exploring plants that start off small but yield big results, coming up next. Over the past 20 years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore ways to create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped to transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to The Garden Home. This is a show about garden design, ways of blurring the lines between inside and out, expanding our living spaces so we have more room and more time to enjoy outdoors. Now, today's show, we're coming from a farm in Oregon where they produce the seed that ultimately yields that gorgeous, lush lawn that we call the carpet for the garden. We'll also talk about problem solvers from this farm in New Hampshire to proven performers in the garden that I fall back on year after year. Right now, let's talk about a way to get the most out of your soil. Now, this has been quite a project and it just keeps going along. But you know, we're making some headway. I mean, just take, for instance, these beds where we just sowed them a month ago and the plants are already jumping up out of the ground. You know, it's important as we begin to develop this organic vegetable garden that we experiment. That's what we're doing in this first season, trying lots of different things. But I have to tell you, we're all familiar with soil conditioners and soil and fertilizer. But one of the key ingredients here that I think has really made a difference is the use of this Mycrorise. But what it is a fungus that is essential to the life of healthy plants. In fact, scientists consider these fungi to be the biological cornerstone of planet Earth. You see, soil is really a living substance, and research indicates that if you can have enough of this mycorrhizal fungi in the soil, which occurs in nature, then it actually helps plants in stressful conditions. And believe me, these little guys have been through some stressful conditions. I mean, there have been days out here this past month it's been over 103 degrees, and they really haven't had that much water, so there's been plenty of stress. I think the mycorrhizes really help bolster them through this rough period. Now, you may be asking, what exactly does it do to the plant? Well, the mycorrhizae just creates an environment that is conducive to good growth. And what you find with these plants that have a good balance of microbes in the soil is that there are a lot of feeder roots. And when you have a lot of feeder roots on a young plant, you know it's going to be able to go through these tough times much easier than one that doesn't have, say, half as many. Now, you may be asking, how do you apply this stuff? Well, it's just like fertilizer. You just work it into the soil. A little bucket like this will feed up to about 260 plants. Now, these beds are about 20 by 3, and we used an entire carton of the Mycrorise. We worked it into the soil, and you can see these little cosmos love it. Well, we're coming along with the house, and they're making some progress with the barn there, but I have to say, it's not moving along fast enough for me. You know, when you design these things and you lay them out, you get a finished image in your head, and you just want to see it immediately. The architect and builder are telling me that we're moving along at the right pace and that I just need to calm down and enjoy the process. So while I've been waiting, I've turned my attention to the garden. You know, I don't want too much time to pass when I can see some improvements, and we're making some real headway out here. I've been considering plants already for next year's garden. I recently talked to an expert about some great bloomers and great foliage plants that not only will work out here in my garden, but will perform beautifully across the country. Jim, you guys have a spectacular display garden here. What criteria do you use to choose the plants, and how do you choose favorites with so many?
Well, the biggest thing I'm looking for is bloom time. You know, 3-season blooming is probably would hit the top of my list.
What are some of your favorites?
Favorites would be Supertunia Vista Bubblegum.
Oh wow, that's a killer.
That petunia is a great landscape plant, just blooms its head off all the time.
It does. It's been very good for me.
Yeah. Diamond Frost Euphorbia is another one, a very delicate flower and actually a very delicate looking plant, but sturdy as anything. Holds up to really strong weather and any kind of conditions.
The color works with anything. It's a white, misty sort of bloom.
Yeah.
It's a good blender.
Yeah, it really fits in with a lot of different plants. I like to use it a lot with combinations and that
What
sort
about
of thing.
the Angelonias? How do they rank for you?
Angelonias are very high. I mean, they're great summer plants especially. They come on a little later in the spring, but once they get going, they're blooming all the time.
And you get that nice, tall, spiky element in the garden.
Great for height element in the garden, great for cutting.
What are some other outstanding bloomers that'd be right at the top of your list?
Another great 3-season bloomer for me are the Intensia phlox, and Cabernet is top of my list for that.
You know, those things bloom so long for me. I had them blooming in November.
Yep, same here. We can have them, and as long as the temperatures are above 15 degrees Fahrenheit, they'll keep going through the fall.
15 degrees.
Yeah, the blooms even hold up to low temperatures.
That really is amazing.
Yeah, it's a great plant, especially in the fall.
Good value. You know, I think in garden design, when you can have a good combination, a good ratio of foliage to bloom, it really makes a difference. You know, it's amazing what the breeders have done with, you know, the common name coral bells or heuchera. I mean, it's just, there's so many to choose from.
Yeah, so many different shades of colors and variegation and that sort of thing. It's very nice and good plants to use.
You know, I have to say, I saw that wonderful Caryopteris up in the display garden this morning. What a gorgeous plant, sunshine blue.
Yeah, it's a great plant, not only for its texture, but when it gets its bloom on and it contrasts with that yellow foliage so nicely. And we use it a lot in our combination big planters and then also out in the landscape.
Yeah, even though it's a shrub.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you get that chartreuse color which just glows in the garden all through the spring and into the summer, and then late in the summer those little tiny blooms come on, those blue blooms.
Yeah, it's very nice, really nice plant.
Well, those are some great choices, Jim. I mean, with that, any garden would shine.
It surely will.
You know, I'm always looking for ways to solve problems in the garden. I've learned if you'll narrow it down to just a few choices in terms of blooming plants and foliage plants, well, it just works better. I enjoy gardening stories that are all about problem solving, and during my visit to New Hampshire, I stumbled on such a story where someone took, well, what was a problem and turned it into a beautiful solution. Now, who doesn't love a success story? I'm here in Lee, New Hampshire, where an entrepreneur with a passion for innovation has taken the family dairy farm and converted it into a vineyard. What was once producing milk now produces wine and other things, and they're doing it with some real innovation. Frank, the winery is so beautiful. Tell me, when did you decide to move from a dairy farm to creating all these beautiful vineyards?
Well, first off, thank you for recognizing it is beautiful, and we've gone out of our way to do that. Actually, I think it probably goes all the way back to my father when he purchased this 175-acre facility for the whopping price of $6,000.
Really? When was that?
That was back in 1949, and he found the place and fell in love with it and ran it as a dairy from 1949, and I actually grew up on this dairy farm up until about 1965, and I think like most young people who shoveled manure and did those kind of basic things of life.
I'll never do this again.
I'll never do that, and if I ever see New England again, it'll be too soon. Well, after 26 years in the submarine service, I actually came back here, and my father and mother still lived here, and well, my father said, anybody who wants to run this thing as an agricultural endeavor, they can just have it. Well, my family is pretty much, I'm the youngest of 9, and they said, well, I'll give it a try, and quite frankly, then I said, what the heck can you grow in New England? It's viable. And we looked at all the traditional crops and said, you know, there's just nothing working. And I thought that new term that was buzzing back then was agrotourism.
Yeah.
And we thought that the concept of grapes and the concept of growing in this region, that would be something that was reasonable to do. And we made the decision in 1990 to go ahead and plant the vineyard, and actually this section right here is our first acre.
You know, what fascinates me about what you're doing here, Frank, at Flag Hill is that you've integrated some green initiatives into the work here.
Yeah, it seemed like the logical thing to do in New Hampshire, and particularly since we have a still that produces 180 degree water and about 1,000 gallons of it, and not using that water and recovering the heat is kind of foolish. So we employed a system called the Dawn Solar System, which helps us take the byproduct heat from the still, and one, it heats the building through a piping system in the floor.
Which is very important in the winter here.
Around here it gets downright cold, and that's our primary heat source for the floor. Plus we have another system in the roof structure that actually takes the sunlight and heats the water, and we use it for domestic hot water for our restaurant.
So the radiant heat coming through the metal roof transfers that thermal energy into the water, and you use that to To preheat the water.
Preheat the water, and it's an excellent source of domestic hot water, and several other components like that. But end result is we're recovering all of that very expensive fuel. Because think about it, when we started our business here just a year ago or 2 years ago, oil was what, $1.25, and now it's $3.25.
Right.
So if you don't figure out
going up
very much, we want to recover that cost, and this is just several initiatives we're taking to, one, stay green because we spent the money, we might as well use it. Plus, it's just common sense. Good agricultural business in today's market.
Well, it's a real inspiration.
Thank you very much, Alan.
Hi, welcome to the Design Studio. This is one of my favorite parts of the show, where I take photographs that you send in and we play around with a few design ideas that might improve the landscape. Now, this is Catherine's house in Idaho. And Catherine, although she's in zone 5, which can be very cold, this, she says, is really a microclimate, and she can grow things here that you can find in zone 7, 2 zones warmer. Now, what I'd like to point out about this house that I like is this courtyard space in here. You can see the path comes along the entire front of the house, and then there's an entryway here into a courtyard. I like the fact that she has what looks to be a Japanese maple here, one here. Now, this is a modern ranch style house, and you can say here we have this really high pediment with this plate glass window which frames a view out to the front of the house. And so what I want to do here is I want to accentuate that with the plantings. Now, some of the things that I don't particularly care about, she's got some plantings here in front which are pretty weak. They look like just some gladiolas she's trialing there in the front. I think if we do away with that and do away with all of this lawn space in front, so you're not having to mow right up against the foundation, I think it would improve it. Now, Catherine told me that she is in what is regarded as high desert. So they really don't have a lot of water, although she has a beautiful, lush green lawn. I mean, it's just fantastic. I mean, it's really an enviable lawn. So I really would take this out along the foundation, but leave the lush lawn right in the front. Now, let's play around with some ideas with both hardscape and with some plants. I mentioned a moment ago that I'd like to frame this pediment, and I would like to take advantage of these blank places across the front of the house. So here I think would be a great opportunity for some sort of tall planting, maybe another Japanese maple. We have an opportunity here for something maybe more columnar, maybe something here slightly columnar, and then perhaps here another Japanese maple that would fill in this side of the house to frame it up. Now, I mentioned that I would do away with the grass against the foundation, and I still stand by that. In terms of hardscape, I think I'd probably place some large boulders, maybe a large boulder here and here, artfully positioned, and maybe another one right here, and maybe one there as well, and then another one, a grouping of boulders here. And then plant, keep a very low ground cover all along the front of the house. This could be something like winter creeper. If you like the Japanese approach with these Japanese maples, you could use Ophiopogon or Mondo grass. And I would pull that all across the front, right up against the boulders like that. And then a foundation planting back here of a low growing shrub. And accentuate just the back there along the foundation, just behind the Mondo grass or whatever ground cover you choose. Maybe another splash of them here, and then another splash here. Now, with irrigation, and this having more of a zone 7 climate, these round shrubs that I've drawn in here, all along here and here, could be dwarf Helleri holly. It could be a little gumpo azalea that blooms much later than the earlier flowering azaleas. Or it could be perhaps something deciduous like little Princess spirea that blooms with a very tiny pink flower, which would be beautiful with this brick. Now let's go back to these trees for just a minute on each side. Here, I think you could repeat a Japanese maple here. And I mentioned that on this side, but this would also be a great place for a weeping cherry. And as far as these columnar trees go, maybe an evergreen would be nice. I'm thinking maybe a pair of columnar junipers on each side. And I think there's an opportunity here by this stone to maybe put one of the extremely dwarf weeping Japanese maples. Now inside the courtyard, you can see we have a Japanese maple there already. I love this theme, following a theme of a certain kind of tree and repeating it over and over. I'd pull some boulders inside that courtyard. It looks like it could be very shady. This would be a great place for ferns and maybe a ground cover such as a juga. And I think that this gutter is a little bit distracting, and this might be an opportunity for a rain chain, and let that bring the water straight down into a pool or puddle of stones or into a drain tile. Now, these are just a few ideas for you to consider, Catherine. I hope they're helpful. You know, I just love the color green. It's so soothing, particularly when it's in the form of a luxurious lawn like this. You know, we Americans have a love affair with our lawns, and why shouldn't we? They bring us such pleasure, such a great place to gather around and on. You know, we spend over 40 hours tending our lawn a year. I mean, that's an entire work week dedicated to tending our turf. Green grass just says summertime to me. It speaks of days spent relaxing and dining outside and of playing croquet on the lawn. And if I do say so myself, the opportunity to indulge in one of my favorite activities. When was the last time you kicked your shoes off and walked across a fresh mowed lawn like this? Well, if it's been a while, you're missing out. You know, there's just something very soothing and satisfying about it. It's like the color green itself. To me, it's very soothing and satisfying. As a garden designer, I look upon the color green as a neutral color, a color that, well, it's really the canvas that we paint our garden pictures on. From lawns like these to trees and shrubs, green makes a great backdrop to our flowering plants, not to mention our lives. These girls look like they're really having a blast. Now, have you ever wondered how to successfully start a lawn? Well, basically, there are three routes you can consider. First, there's sod. It's an instant lawn, but if price is an issue, or you're doing a very large area, you might want to investigate another option, such as hydroseeding. Now, hydroseeding for a long time was used mainly on commercial projects, but today many homeowners are turning to this method to get a quick lawn. Now, this is ideal for new homeowners who are establishing a lawn for the first time. Now, you'll want to make sure that you keep the soil consistently moist once the hydroseed goes down to ensure success. Now, the third way is the old time-honored approach of sowing seed directly onto the ground. You just want to make sure that you have the soil prepared properly, and then use a spreader so you can get even distribution of seed over the entire area. And again, moisture is key. You need to make sure that the soil stays consistently moist for germination and successful plant growth. Now, while this lush lawn looks like an ideal backdrop to any garden setting, it's important to note that not every grass variety is right for every location. Let's head back to the grass farm in Oregon to find out some more about getting the right variety for your backyard oasis. As we're seeing in this show, what starts off small can have big potential. Take these grass seed, for instance. They can go from this to this. Now, I'm sure that most of us, one time or another, established a lawn by growing seed. You've either started one from scratch or plumped up the lawn you have. And depending on how you went about it and the seed you used, well, that would determine your results. Now, what they're doing out here on this farm in Oregon is not only growing grass for its beauty, but how it really works. And what I mean by that is, how disease resistant is it? How often do you have to mow it? How much water do you have to put on it? All of those things. What they're working on is finding grasses that actually make our job easier and make our lawns more successful. Tammy Brown, resident grass guru, lawn lover, sod superhero, whatever you want to call her, is a seed expert who sure knows her turf. We were lucky enough to catch up with Tammy, where she told us a few of her secrets and shared the ins and outs of sod science. Now, Tammy, when you're selecting a grass, what are you looking for to make a perfect lawn?
There are certain qualities that we have learned over the years that maintain even in a large plant. The crown density, the finer leaves. The wide leaves here don't make as good of a turf type in the open plant, Whereas this one has smaller leaves, a denser crown.
Oh yes, I can see that.
You can see that it would make a better turf. We also look at color. We look at how bright the green is and how dark the plant looks as opposed to one next to it, which is more yellow.
It is. There's a marked difference between that one and this one. And they're both getting all the same conditions. I mean, same light, certainly the same moisture, and you're feeding them the same.
Yes, this field is treated all the same.
So this one's just darker because genetically it's programmed to be darker.
Right.
Well, that's the one I want for my lawn.
Okay.
Do you have examples of, say, this is obviously one you chose, so could we see it in mass as a lawn?
Yes, we have turf plots that I can show you right down here.
Let's take a look. All right, now I can see it. Now we're talking turf here, Tammy. Look at all these different subtle variations.
Yep. And this carries forward from the single plants.
You're taking the guesswork out of it for the homeowner because you're selecting for that really rich dark green color.
Right.
Yeah.
We're looking for colors that look good, and then we put it out here and we check it out. And we want to make sure that it does look good and what we do produce will carry forward.
Now what's so interesting to me is that we looked at those clumps of individuals, but when you bring them together, and I guess when you plant them side by side, you're sowing the seed very densely, the plants become smaller, the blade becomes smaller, and that's where you begin to get that lush turf-like look that's consistent and green across the board.
Right. As you mow them and they're forced down, they have to stay small. If you look in a corner here, you can see that this is very wide.
It is. It does have a broad blade.
It has the opportunity to spread, and so it will.
You know, Tammy, when you look out across here, you can really see it does look like a patchwork quilt.
And everything out here gets the same amount of fertilizer, the same amount of water. We're not treating any special. They all get mowed at the same exact height.
Yeah, same conditions.
Same conditions.
But you can really see how they, I guess, behave themselves as a community.
That's right.
Rather than an individual.
Yep.
Excellent. Is this not a gorgeous lawn? It really makes me happy. When I see a lawn like this, I want to do backflips, cartwheels, kick off my shoes and run across it barefooted. Well, I hope it has the same effect on you. But you know, here, they take lawns very seriously. They develop lawn grasses that are drought tolerant. So they're very sensitive to this idea of water conservation, which is a huge issue in our country. Here's some tips to keep in mind. It's best to keep the length of the grass high, about 2 to 2.5 inches. This helps retain moisture because the blades shade the roots. If it is cut too short, you'll stress the grass, which will invite problems with disease. Of course, the grass clippings themselves are worth their weight in gold. So bag them as you mow or rake them up and put them in the compost bin. Before you know it, you can recycle them back into your flower beds as a rich homemade source of humus. Now when it comes to watering, it's best done in the early morning so that the moisture will dry by mid-morning. Allowing your lawn to dry before nightfall will also cut down on problems with disease. You know, I have to say, I couldn't resist coming out here one more time. It's such an enchanting place. Big, long stretches of lawn and these beautiful white birch trees. It's made me homesick for my own garden. In fact, I can't wait to get back there and see the progress on the cottage at the Garden Home Retreat. I hope you'll join me next time. Until then, from the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at pallansmith.com.
On an upcoming episode of P. Allen Smith's Garden Home.
We're grilling up good times in the garden. Get the scoop on outdoor living spaces that are ideal for cooking up the bounty of the harvest. Learn about repotting shrubby herbs and small trees, and get a construction update and find out why mold is public enemy #1 out here. And we take rainwater so seriously, we're looking at ways of harvesting whatever Mother Nature throws our way.